I believe in syncretism, synergy, synthesis in all things, not spreading things apart, but putting them together. Why? Because oftentimes we find that parts in isolation really don't form coherent wholes. Wholes can be greater than the sums of their parts, right? Which may be a point against what I'm saying, trying to take two wholes and put them together and make something less than each whole independently because those wholes are greater than some of their parts. I don't know, right? But it could also make something even greater. It could amount for all of the flaws we find in every one individual thing. Because how often do you find a spiritual tradition that just has everything so right for you and then one thing's off? They've got everything. They know it all. They've got the right answer for God for you. They've got the right rituals. They've got the right people. But one little thing, for example, the color or the clothes that they prescribe people must wear does not jive with you. That's a large example, but I'm sure there are other examples of things that just don't work with you. So what I'm thinking about in particular is the tendency of the spiritual community to mind bash and the tendency of the intellectual community to spirit bash. And I don't really see these things at odds at all. Let me explain for a minute. And I would want to make an even stronger claim, is that I think sometimes it can be dangerous to do both those paths. For example, the spiritual people who mind bash, well, they basically allow for people's minds to go to welter, to go to complete mush, to disappear. And I've met so many spiritual people, quote-unquote spiritual people, new agey people, who just basically seem like airheads. They've got no thoughts in their head because they're told, don't think. Thinking is bad. You must be in a state of peace all the time. And I feel like that comment right there comes from a great misunderstanding. So Patanjali talks about Purusha and Prakriti. This is the seer and the seen. Now, I think what these spiritual people are trying to get at, the gurus, is that we shouldn't identify with what we're seeing. We're the seer, we're the witness, and to be caught up in what's seen, Prakriti, in nature, in Maya, illusion, is basically like talking to your friend about one of their problems and then all of a sudden getting involved in it. All of a sudden now it's not their issue, it's yours. I mean, the easiest example of this is a movie, right? We watch a movie and we get so involved in whatever the protagonist is doing, right? Or if it's a scary movie, whatever the victim is doing, that our emotions and our hearts are completely there, immersed in it. And we forget about ourselves. We forget that it's just a movie. But our lives are just the same. And the truth of it is that this is a choice. The truth of it is, who the hell knows what is going on? I mean, come on, get with it. If you can look at it that way, right? If you can look at it the way where you don't have to be involved in all your shit, right? We can start to think, well, what does that do for us? Is it in our interest to think that this is it? Is it in our interest to think that, well, if we feel it, it must be true? Or if it's happening to us like that, that's the only way that we can experience it. How does that serve us? Because it doesn't serve me. It doesn't help me to have certain experiences, like going into a restaurant, the checkout counter, and the waitress looks at me with a snarl and think to myself, well, that's it. That's life, right? Or a teacher gives me back something that I put my heart into and tells me it's crap, right? I just think to myself of John Mayer when I went to go visit Berklee School of Music, and the tour guide was saying that when he came out with My Body is a Wonderland as his thesis project, or a project in a class, the teacher had giving him a C on it. This is crap, John. Go change it. Well, I mean, we're sort of combining a lot of things in this idea here. But look, I mean, if the seer, John, had gotten caught up with the scene, his teachers ragging on his work, he might have changed it. And if he had changed it, he might not have ever been as successful as he is today. He might never have gotten his break. Now that's a big deal. So there's a flip side of it. And the flip side of it is spiritual people, is scientific, intellectual people talking about the absence of the soul, right? And this applies to what we were saying. Then you get too caught up in the material, in nature, in prakriti. If all there is the prakriti, well then guess what? We're missing out on our potential for ipseity, our potential to draw back and really examine our lives and act in accordance with our will, with our true volition. And that's what power is. And similarly, if we don't cultivate our minds, it's not a matter of, then our tool won't be of greatest use, right? I mean, just take a page from music. When a great jazz musician is improvising or jamming with other musicians, yeah, sure, their mind's off. Yeah, sure, they're not thinking. But just think about this. How much time, effort, and thought do you think went into getting them to that state where they can perform so effortlessly now? And when I take a look at all the gurus that I've met or who are in my life right now, one thing strikes me as being in common with every single one of them. And that is that they are all intelligent people. And more so, they all have their chops down. And more so than that, the greatest ones out of all of them can rail off to you exactly what they think immediately. And if you don't think that takes some skill, if you don't think that takes some talent, if you don't think that takes some thought, well, I'll tell you, you've got a whole lot more thinking to do. So with that, I wish your soul much love and many blessings, and let me know what you think.